Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge or, in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people,
which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you, and we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello, and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Oh my goodness. This has been a long season. I think if you are a return listener, then you will know a little bit of our story. But this has been a season of what I'm calling tumor termination 2, as we are in the midst of terminating my son's second brain tumor. And if you're new here, then there might be a lot to catch up on. As today, I'm going to kind of do a personal update and personal story that has, of course, application, and that I think will serve all of you. But you might want to go back and listen to a previous episode to really kind of get the full grasp. Specifically, I share a little bit more in episode 15. So before I get much further along in this episode, I wanted to dedicate it to all the care professionals that have been supporting us, specifically Nurse Sarah, Nurse Lori, and all the PICU people. I'm sure you all know this. This is not new to any of you that have done any time in the hospital. That the difference between a nurse who is competent at their job and somebody that goes the extra mile it's life-changing. The small moments actually mean so much when you are in the midst of a long, boring / scary hospital stay. Having nurses that just put their extra care in. They go the extra effort to engage with your child. It meant a lot. So thank you specifically to Sarah. Okay, where will we go? Where will we go on this episode? So I'm going to share a story, like I said earlier, about one of my own experiences where I specifically am going to talk about resistance to what was happening. And at the end, I'm going to share a really funny story that happened between my husband and I. Again, to give a little bit of background and context to the conversation, my son Levi had a nasal endoscopic surgery on October 21st, which is a long way of saying he had surgery through his nose in his brain. Things went well at first. Things were going really well. Mostly. We had a couple hiccups. I'm going to spare you all the details because otherwise this would get very long. And if you do want all the details, I'll put a link on the show notes that you can read every single detail. And I'm sure have nightmarish dreams like I do. Okay, so we sprung a leak. So the common complication with this type of surgery that Levi has is having a CSF or a cerebral spinal fluid leak. And we actually ultimately ended up having 3. So we had 1 leak, we had surgery, we had leak number 2, then we had surgery and a lumbar drain to help remediate that. And then eventually we had leak number 3, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So bringing you back to, I suppose this would be about a week. Okay, today's Wednesday, so this is actually almost exactly a week ago. Okay, so that's a little bit of the background. And currently, just as a personal update, we got home last night. So today is Wednesday morning. So we got home Tuesday evening, and it came as a little bit of a surprise. I was mentally prepared and in all the other ways prepared to almost be at the hospital through the week, just knowing that things usually take longer than you think they will take. And so it actually kind of came as a little bit of a blindside to be sent home the same day that they removed his drain. I was okay with it, but it definitely threw me off. So here we are now home. We've had no dripping so far, so this is a praiseworthy note. Yet we still have a lot of appointments and steps ahead of us for us to be kind of out of this season. So I'm sure you'll get to hear more about each step of the way. But back to kind of what the story that I specifically wanted to share about what happened last week. So last week on Tuesday evening, we were sent home, and it was a huge celebration. It was really something that we were anticipating. We were looking forward to it. And all day in the hospital, we were anticipating, the actual discharge orders and then being able to drive home. And, we really celebrated it. And if you follow me on social media, you will remember this. And I was all the way in. Celebrating. I even unpacked all of my bags, and I was ready to be home. And I was expecting the hospital part to be over, right? It already had gone on much longer than we anticipated. And so I was very set on it being done. So what happened was the Wednesday morning, so the next morning, I walked past my son's room and I saw his bed, and I saw a largish wet area on his pillow, much too large to be just drool. And so I thought, okay, that does not look good. And I walked downstairs. Levi was on the couch. My husband was down with the other kids, and my husband let me know that Levi indeed was reporting that he was leaking. Something that very specifically would send us back to the hospital. So you can imagine the disappointment in that moment. You can imagine the fear of now what's going to happen. And it was a real hard one to swallow. And quite honestly, I had several moments where I was like, I'm just going to pretend that that's not happening, and I'm going to not tell the doctors. And that was a short-lived thought, because soon I thought, okay, well, the risk of infection is there, and gosh, it's leaking more than we can ignore. So our strategy was to get all of the kids situated so they could go to school, so they would be safe and sound and kind of have their day set, and to call the doctor's office. So they had us head down, which for us is like a 45 minute drive, almost an hour situation once you include parking, walking, and all that. So we head back down to the hospital, and we end up meeting with a nurse practitioner who really just kind of helped facilitate a conversation with the doctor, in which case the plan was suggested to us that they would do surgery again later in the evening once all the scheduled cases were done. So we turned around and we went back home. And of course, we couldn't eat or drink at that point. And when I say we, I mean Levi. I know it's something that he got quite used to, but it's still not easy, especially managing all of his other medical conditions. So we went home, and I did what any semi-rational mom would do at this point, and I went and bought all sorts of new soft clothes. I thought, if I'm doing this, I'm doing it softer. I also had scheduled an appointment with an acupuncturist, and that I had scheduled several days before, that I was looking forward to going to kind of start to repair and kind of release all the stress that I knew was kind of stuck in my body. I was very tempted to not do this appointment, as you can imagine, with all the moving parts with getting ready to go back down to the hospital, back to surgery and all that. But I thought, you know what? Like, this is the most important thing I can do right now, is to take care of myself. And I knew also that putting my self-care in the hands of somebody else, like a trusted acupuncturist, was really all I could do. I was not in a mental place, and I'll tell you more about that later, to really give myself anything. And so just being able to lay on this table and to receive the care that he was providing, it was really helpful, really, really helpful. It at least allowed like the kink in my neck and some other areas that were really causing a lot of pain to be helped. So my husband and I had decided that instead of us both being down at the hospital like we typically would for a surgery, that my husband was going to take my son Levi and I was going to stay home with our other children. And normally, Levi wants me to be down with him prior to surgeries, and I want to be there for him as well. However, our other children, particularly my 4-year-old daughter, were at the point where they were really, really struggling with all that was happening. The disruption to their life, the disruption to what kind of made them feel safe. And so for that reason, we decided that I would stay home with our other children, and that Dan was perfectly capable and Levi was going to be in great hands with Dan as they prepared to be at surgery again. And Levi actually was in a lot of pain at this point. His head pain was pretty significant. And so he was a pretty miserable little boy, both with the head pain and with the emotional impact of having to have yet another surgery. But it was hard. It was hard for me not to be there for the surgery. It's hard that I was at a point where my life had it be so that surgery was actually kind of a regular thing now, because we had been doing so many different surgeries. There was this couple moments where I was putting my children to bed and doing all the things like showering them and, trying to get them down so that I could then have a few minutes to myself before I wanted to go to bed. That I was just thinking, like, this is so crazy that my son is in surgery right now and I am at home putting my kids to sleep. Like, I don't know, it just was a mind-boggling experience. And I will say, beyond mind-boggling, I would say that I think it was at a point emotionally where likely the survival instinct of being kind of numb or frozen was still being very much maintained. So I wouldn't say I had an overflowing of emotion. If anything, I would say I didn't feel a lot at all. But there was a moment where my husband had called me with the conversation that he had with the surgeon prior to Levi going into surgery, where the surgeon shared that he was actually a little bit stumped. He was at a point where he reached out to his mentors because he had never come across this issue as he was having with Levi. And he laid out the options for the surgery, and he laid out the potential what ifs for if this didn't go as he was hoping. And they were hard to hear. They were really hard to hear. Some additional interventions that would change Levi forever. So like I was saying, I'm processing this information as I'm putting my other children to bed and really kind of wanting to have like a moment, even just to like, I was like, I just want to go in the shower and cry this out. But for me, I think I have an experience where when I'm kind of still fighting to survive through something, I'm not yet ready to feel it, in the sense of like allow the expression of that emotion. Now, if this goes on, you guys know I'm a big proponent of feeling your feelings and not stuffing them down. I would say there is a difference though between being in a survival state, like, right? So this is a time period that's going to have a beginning and ending. Hopefully. No, it will. And so that is different than living in that state. And so I think what I'm explaining is that I was kind of in this state of still surviving. So my emotion and my access to really even the thoughts that are creating emotions were just less accessible to me. And so back to kind of just looking at Wednesday, all day, I was not okay. I knew I wasn't okay. I was really in a bad mental, emotional place. And it was, like I said, it was really hard to put to words. Like maybe sad, maybe mad. I think also just pissed off that this is how it was going. Ultimately, things were not going my way. I was not okay with this. It was happening, but I was not on board. I was very much resisting what was. And so, of course, you can imagine if somebody's pissed, you're going to see a significant shift in how they show up. It's like the resistance of like not wanting to be there, but having to, right? You can imagine, you've seen people, at work that you can tell like they're there, but they're not there. And so this was kind of the experience I was having that day, that I was there, but I wasn't there. And there was also this experience that I was like kind of becoming familiar with, even as we were preparing to leave the hospital. I was like kind of noticing that I was letting my like routines and letting my kind of systems go. Like I kind of had a system of going home and washing my clothes and getting back for the next day and kind of like making sure that I was set and ready for the next day. And I noticed myself kind of lessening and letting go of that with the anticipation of going home. Similar to when I go camping, it's like, beginning of the week, you're like washing all the dishes, you're kind of in your routine. And then for me, by the end of the week, it would be like, it's on the last morning, like, let's just not wash the French press. Like, we'll just throw it in there. We'll wash it tomorrow. It'll be fine. Almost like just like tossing things about and like throwing dirty dishes everywhere versus living in and being kind of like fully engaged in living there. And so I really noticed that I really shifted and kind of like I was ready to end this trip. And it wasn't ending. So at some point on this Wednesday, I spoke to one of my friends and mentors and colleagues, Mary. She just gave me the space of kind of doing a mental download, like just verbally, just talking through kind of like where I was at, what I was upset about, how it was really going. And I kind of came up with the idea is like, I'm just not ready. I am not ready to accept that this is the next step, that we're going back in the hospital and it's not going to be a quick trip. And I just kind of even said, I'm going to allow myself to just be at this place today. Allow all Wednesday. I can just be in this funk. I can have a bad attitude. I can throw dirty pans everywhere, like literally. Or I guess in this case, dirty clothes. I can just allow myself to be there, to not have to evolve beyond it. I wasn't ready to move on. So that's what I did to the best of my ability. And I had a commitment to myself though, that come the next morning, once I sleep, once I get my kids to school, then I was going to re-engage and accept, or do my best to accept what was happening. So I went to sleep concerned for my son's well-being, but having a good report from the doctor. And then I got my kids to school and I started to repack. And I repacked my bags in a way that was really kind of a process of accepting that I'm going on another trip. I packed my new soft clothes. I washed those. And instead of fighting with what was happening, I mean, for lack of a better way of saying it, I really just kind of accepted this is what's happening. This allowed me to partner with what was happening versus resisting it. It allowed me to look at the situation and show up in a way that felt better to me. And it allowed me to maintain my commitments to myself, my son, and my family. You can just picture if I was still this like upset teenager that was at work and clearly didn't want to be there. You can imagine that I wasn't going to show up for myself, my son, or my family. I was going to do the bare minimum. And, this is not a situation where that's going to work very long. More than that, though, it allowed me to stop the double suffering from resistance on top of the fear, the sadness, the discomfort, the disappointment, right? So I still had, don't get me wrong, I didn't evolve into this oh, this is amazing. I'm so glad we're here. No, it was still really hard. There's still the fear, this disappointment. I think at this point, I guess he was going to be in the hospital for Halloween at this point. I can't remember what happened first. It's a little foggy, right? But I didn't have the suffering and the resistance and the bad attitude is an easy way to describe it on top of it. So that's my story. And here's my guess. My guess is that if you are a special needs mom, that there's areas of your life that you're resisting as well. That you're kind of like, no, I don't want them to be happening. And so you kind of protest them. You resist what is. And so I guess I wanted to give you a second just to kind of think, is there an area in your life that you are resisting? Perhaps something is not going how you want it to go. And you're kind of just stuck there. You can't get past that you don't want it to be this way. And maybe you're holding on to what should have been or what used to be. This is an interesting part, what used to be, right? Even if you've accepted many parts of your child's diagnosis and or conditions and or experience, some things change. You may gain, you may lose. And so even though you have maybe come to a place of acceptance, now you're being asked to do it one step further or in a new way. And so I just wanted to give you a chance to kind of think about the idea of resistance. I like to make myself available for conversations over on Instagram. My email is readily available on my website. And so if you're like, oh my gosh, I have this area, I think this is what I'm doing, have a conversation with me. This is what delights me more than anything. So that is my story about resisting what is. Now, I thought it would be funny to share with you a comical situation between my husband and I during our hospital stay. So, coffee has been, right? Coffee is a legitimate lifeline in the hospital, especially the PICU. We were there for 2.5 weeks. And so I was headed down to the hospital one day and I texted my husband. I said, I'm going to read this to you so that I'm not skewing the story. So what I wrote to him via voice text specifically, because I was driving and trying to be very safe, I said, let me know your drink order when you have a chance. Aren't I a nice wife? Oh, I laugh because it's not always the case. Okay. So the response I get pretty quickly was, venti 8-shot 5 times stevia with a mix of whole milk and half and half. Okay. A moment later, I get another text saying, coffee with steamed oat milk. Just make sure they put enough in. Okay. A little backstory. The second is my husband's regular drink. That's what we often get. Okay. So I was like, okay, so, the first order must have been for a nurse. He must have had a nurse in the room and thought, hey, I'll see if the nurse wants a coffee drink. Awesome. I was like, great. glad to do that. That sounds amazing. So I go to Starbucks and I order this and I was like, I'm going to actually walk inside because this drink doesn't seem like it's going to translate over, the little intercom thing. So I'm like, I'm just going to show you this drink because it's a little bit odd, right? And so this person, the Starbucks barista, rings it up and is also kind of like, oh, this is an interesting drink. And I was a little like, wow, that was pretty bold of the nurse to like go 8 Venti shot. Like, okay, he is tired. So they ring it up. I want you to guess how much this coffee was. Just guess. 8 shot Venti, blah, blah, blah. Okay. It was $10.55 for this coffee. And so I thought, you know what? This is the time. This is the time we use that prized and idolized free drink at Starbucks. Like how you get the points and you get your free one. You don't want to waste those. Like they're precious things, right? So I was like, okay, this is clearly the time. I'm going to get the value here. I am redeeming my free drink. Okay. So I go on my merry way. I was honestly like at this point, totally fine about it. Like I was like, whatever the nurse wants, it's cool. I get to the hospital. I'm carrying 3 drinks in the drink holder. And my husband looks at me and he's like, who's this for? And I like look at him. I was like, you tell me. Like you ordered it. And he's like, you didn't get that crazy drink, did you? And I was like, yeah, I did. And he's like, oh, I was joking. And I'm like, wait, what? So at this point, I'm like, okay, no longer am I generous and cool about buying this drink. I'm now like really mad, like actually mad that he thought that was funny. And it was hilarious because there was actually 2 nurses in the room at the time this is all happening. So they're seeing this marriage breakdown happen. It wasn't a breakdown, but it was just like, I feel like it might have been not awkward. It might have been like funny to witness, I hope. And so then like with the nurses, I'm like, I'm going to show you this text and you guys are going to tell me what you think. And so I show them, they're like, yeah, that wasn't super clear. Cause I'm like, babe, you need to do like a JK or, oh, never mind. Like something like that does not, yes, I could have been like, so was that for the nurse? Like, I could have done that, but, it's much easier just to blame it on him. So anyhow, that is my funny coffee story about what happened. And I still tease my husband that he owes me a coffee drink, because he wasted my free one. So the moral of that story is there's no moral. It's just funny. Okay. You might also hear my voice is a little, I'm like coming down with a cold now. I'm like on top of everything. I can't get sick at this point. We have a lot more healing ahead of us. And I think I'll kind of close this in saying kind of where we're at now. So like I said earlier in the episode, we are home. We are hopefully stable. We actually had a really rough night last night with Levi, my son, getting up and vomiting a ridiculous amount on my master bedroom carpet. And so we're dealing with that. And while I was up in the middle of the night cleaning that up, I was like, oh, that tickle in my throat sure does seem like I'm getting my daughter's cold, in which case I am. So I am bummed about that. But thankful that we're home because I feel like being home and sick is much better than being at the hospital every other day and sick. So now we just need to care for Levi, get through these next steps. And really, I think it's just continuing the one day at a time and accepting what is. Really, this will be work that I continue to do as right now it's hard for me not to be fully engaged in my work. It's hard for me not to have my routine. And so over and over again, I'll be doing inventory about what I might be resisting and offering myself the opportunity to let it go, to accept it. And like I said earlier, to partner with it so that together with the circumstances happening, I can still create something that feels good, feels better than the resistance. I don't say something that creates something that I like because I still might not like it. I didn't like going to the hospital, but I did create a partnership with what was happening so that I could still show up in a way that actually felt good to me as far as showing up in the world. It was really good to be with you all today, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. We will see you next week, and you know what? I will share more funny stories next week, and hopefully no more vomit or hospital stories from here. So see you next week. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.